Caleb never liked the sound of a mail-order marriage. In his mind, marriage was something that grew slowly, like the cottonwoods along the creek behind his ranch. It took roots, patience, and honest feeling. He told everyone in town that if love ever came to him, it would come naturally. And if it didn't, he was fine, living alone. He had the ranch, the sky, the horses, and enough work to fill every hour of his life. Still, even a strong man feels lonely sometimes. Caleb felt it late at night, when the wind pushed against the windows, and the house stayed silent. He felt it while eating breakfast alone, staring at the empty chair across from him. He felt it during long rides through open land, when he had no one to talk to except his horse. But he refused to complain. Life had already taken his parents, and he didn't want to expect anything more from the world. Expectations often led to heartbreak. People in town liked him. They respected how hard-working he was. They liked how he fixed fences for widows, how he brought supplies for the old couple who lived near the river, and how he never turned away from someone who needed help. But they also believed he needed someone beside him. A few women tried to catch his attention, but Caleb always stayed polite and distant. The truth was, he didn't want to lead anyone on when his heart wasn't ready. One morning, he rode into town to buy salt, nails, and flour. It was an ordinary day, nothing special in the air. The sky was clear, the sun was warm, and his horse trotted easily on the dirt road. Caleb tied the horse outside the general store and stepped inside. The owner, Mr. Fielding, greeted him with a laugh. "You're still on your own out there, Caleb? One day, we'll see you walk in with a ring." Caleb shook his head with the same small smile he always gave. "Not likely." Mr. Fielding teased him again, and Caleb took it in good humor. He paid for his supplies and stepped back outside, swinging the sack over the horse. Before he mounted up, he noticed people walking toward the train station. The train wasn't due often, so when it arrived, the whole town usually wandered over to watch who stepped off. Caleb didn't care much about trains, but since everyone else headed that way, he followed slowly, not in a hurry. The whistle echoed across the buildings, and steam rose as the train slowed. Caleb stood among the crowd, his hat tilted forward to block the sun. A small door opened, and passengers began stepping out. A man with a heavy bag, a woman carrying a basket, a young boy running to meet his father. All of it looked normal, just another arrival in a quiet town. Then she stepped out. She wore a simple dress, one that had clearly been worn many times. Her hands clutched a small brown travel bag. Her eyes were soft, tired, and full of quiet hope that seemed too fragile for the loud steam of the train behind her. She stepped onto the platform carefully, as if she was afraid her feet might fail her. She looked around, scanning the crowd for a face she recognized. But there was no one. The man she expected wasn't there. Caleb didn't know any details, but he could tell from the way she stood in place, holding her breath, that something was wrong. Her eyes kept searching. Her fingers tightened on the handle of her bag. And then, just for a moment, she blinked quickly, like someone trying hard not to let a tear fall. Caleb didn't move. He wasn't the kind of man who jumped into other people's business. But something about her small, brave posture, the way she tried to hide her disappointment, made him stay exactly where he was. He watched quietly as the station master approached her. "Miss, are you waiting for someone?" She nodded, her voice small. "Yes," he said he would be here. But no one stepped forward. The station master looked uncomfortable, like he already knew what had happened. The whole town had heard whispers that a man named Harris was expecting a mail-order bride, but that same man had been seen drinking the night before, complaining loudly that he didn't need a wife after all and that he'd changed his mind. Caleb had overheard that conversation, but ignored it. Now he stood there realizing the abandoned woman in front of him must be the one Harris had written to. Her eyes moved across the people again. Slower this time, with even less hope. She wasn't dramatic. She didn't cry loudly or complain. She simply breathed in shakily and lowered her head, as if trying not to show how much it hurt. Caleb felt something in his chest shift. People around him whispered. Some felt bad for her. Some simply watched. No one stepped forward. And Harris, coward that he was, didn't show his face. Emma didn't know where to go. She didn't know anyone. She had traveled for days, believing she was headed toward a new life. Instead, she was alone on a train platform, in a foreign place. Caleb walked a few steps closer without even planning to. It felt natural, like the ground pulled him forward. She looked up when he stopped near her. "Ma'am," he said gently, "do you need help?" She blinked again, trying not to look embarrassed. I don't want to trouble anyone. I'll just find a corner somewhere to sit until I figure out what to do." Her voice was soft, polite, and shaking just enough that he heard it. Caleb shook his head. "Ma'am, no one should be left alone like this. If the man who sent for you isn't here, that's not your fault." Her eyes widened slightly. "You know about that. Small towns tend to know things," Caleb answered quietly. She looked down at her hands. "He changed his mind. I guess I wasn't worth meeting." Caleb felt anger rise, but not at her, at the man who abandoned her so carelessly. Still, he kept his tone calm. "That's not what it means." She tried to smile but couldn't manage it. "I'll be fine. I've worked before. I can work again. I just need a day or two to think." Caleb hesitated. He had sworn he'd never take a mail-order bride. He had sworn he would mind his own life and not look for anything more. But seeing her standing there alone made all his old rules feel small and meaningless. "Ma'am," he said, "my place isn't far. It's quiet and safe. You can rest there until you decide what to do next." She looked startled. "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. It's just a place to rest. That's all." She searched his expression as if trying to see whether he had hidden intentions. When she found none, she slowly nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. He picked up her small bag, surprised by how light it was. She had almost nothing with her. That small detail hit him harder than he expected. She followed him toward his horse, walking carefully, like someone afraid the ground might shift beneath her feet. Caleb helped her mount gently. He didn't know her name yet. She didn't know his. But something unspoken settled between them, a quiet trust built in a few minutes. As they rode away from the station, the town behind them buzzed with whispers. People wondered what would happen next. But Caleb didn't care about gossip. He looked at the woman holding the saddle strap tightly, her eyes still slightly wet from everything she had faced. He had never believed in fate, but he couldn't shake the strange feeling that something important had begun the moment he saw her step off the train with a tear in her eye. And for the first time in a long while, Caleb didn't feel alone on the road home. Caleb guided the horse slowly along the dusty trail that led toward his ranch. The woman sat carefully behind him, holding the saddle strap tightly, her posture straight and polite. She didn't say much, and Caleb didn't push her to talk. The wind lifted small strands of her hair, and she kept her eyes on the land, as if trying to understand this new place. Every few minutes, she took a quiet breath, the kind people take when they're trying not to feel overwhelmed. After a while, Caleb spoke gently. "If the ride is uncomfortable, let me know. We can stop." She shook her head quickly. Her voice was soft, controlled, but he could hear the tiredness behind it. She must have been traveling for days, facing disappointment the moment she arrived. He wished he could erase that moment at the train station, the fear in her eyes, the way she stood alone. They reached the edge of his land, where the worn wooden fence stretched far into the distance. The house stood modest, but well kept, with a wide porch and a small barn beside it. Smoke drifted lightly from the chimney, showing the fire he had lit that morning was still alive. When they stopped near the porch, Caleb climbed down first, then offered his hand to help her. She hesitated only a second before placing her hand in his. Her fingers were cold and delicate. He helped her down carefully so she didn't slip. "This is my home," he said quietly. "It's not fancy, but it's safe." She looked around with a soft expression, as if taking in every detail. Peaceful. Not many people use that word to describe anything in the West. But she said it with such sincerity that Caleb felt a small warmth in his chest. He carried her bag inside while she stayed near the door. She stepped in slowly, as if afraid she might disturb something. Caleb noticed she kept her hands together, like she wasn't sure what she was allowed to touch. "You can sit," he said gently, pulling out a chair. "You must be tired." She sat slowly, her posture polite. Caleb poured her some water from the clay jug. "Thank you," she said again, her eyes lowering in appreciation. "You don't need to thank me so much," Caleb replied. "Anyone with decency would have done the same." She looked away, her eyes sad. "Not everyone has decency." Her words landed heavily. Caleb didn't ask for details. He didn't want to hurt her more. Instead, he waited for her to speak on her own, if she wished. After a quiet moment, she took a breath. "My name is Emma." Caleb nodded. "I'm Caleb." Emma repeated his name softly, almost as if testing the sound. "Thank you, Caleb. I know you don't know me, and you owe me nothing. You probably have your own responsibilities. But you still brought me here." Caleb leaned against the table, his arms crossed gently. "You needed help, and it didn't seem right to leave you in town alone." Emma nodded slowly. "The man who sent for me, I thought he would be kind. His letters, well, they weren't warm, but they were polite enough. I thought maybe with time, we would understand each other." She pressed her hands together nervously. "When I stepped off the train and he wasn't there, I told myself there was a reason. Maybe he was late. Maybe he had been held up somewhere." Caleb listened quietly, seeing the hurt she tried to hide. "But he never came," Emma continued softly. "And suddenly, I felt foolish. Foolish for believing in the promise of a new start. Foolish for thinking someone wanted me." Caleb felt a tightness in his chest. "You're not foolish. He's the one who acted poorly." She gave a small, fragile smile. "Maybe. But I still ended up alone." "Where?" "You're not alone now," he said simply. Emma lowered her gaze again, her eyelashes trembling slightly. "I don't want to be a burden. Just give me a day or two, and I'll find work in town. I can sew, cook, clean, whatever I need to do." Caleb shook his head. "You don't have to rush. Rest first. We'll think things through after you're feeling better." Emma looked around the house again as if memorizing every corner. She noticed a loose curtain by the window and the way the firewood pile leaned to one side. Her natural instinct to help seemed to rise, but she didn't act on it yet. "You've kept this place well," she said gently. Caleb shrugged. "I try. But having 2 hands instead of 4 makes it slow work." Emma nodded, her expression thoughtful. Maybe I could help a little. Only while I stay." Caleb smiled a little. "Only if you want to." She nodded again, more firmly this time. "I would like to feel useful." The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. Emma helped tidy the table, and even started preparing a simple meal. She moved carefully, always checking to make sure she wasn't overstepping. Caleb noticed she worked with steady hands, as if doing small tasks helped calm her mind. When she cooked, she hummed under her breath a tiny, almost inaudible tune that made the house feel strangely warm. Caleb found himself pausing just to listen. Later, they sat down to eat. Emma served him first out of habit, then realized what she'd done and pulled back. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to presume." Caleb shook his head. You didn't do anything wrong. She took a small bite, eating slowly. I know you didn't bring me here expecting anything. That's why I feel safe. Her words caught him off guard. Caleb wasn't used to compliments. He wasn't used to anyone reading him so clearly. Emma continued softly. You didn't look at me the way some men do. Not with judgment. Not with expectations. Just kindness. Caleb didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded. After the meal, she washed the dishes while he stepped outside to check on the animals. When he returned, Emma had folded her small cloak neatly and was sitting near the fire. She didn't slouch. She didn't seem uneasy. For the first time since he met her, she looked almost comfortable. You can take the room on the right, Caleb said. It's clean. I'll stay in my usual room. Emma stood up. Thank you. You don't have to keep thanking me, Caleb said again. She gave a small smile. I know. But I'm saying it because I mean it. He nodded and stepped aside so she could enter the guest room. She looked at the bed as if she hadn't seen one in a long time. She set her small bag down carefully. Do you have everything you need? Caleb asked. Emma paused. I have enough. Caleb noticed how few items she had, just a dress, a few personal things, and a folded letter she kept tucked in the bag. It made him wonder what her life had been like before coming here. But he didn't pry. She sat on the edge of the bed. I'll repay you somehow. For the room. For the food. For the ride. You don't owe me anything, he said. She met his eyes. I do. Not in a heavy way. But I want to do something good in return. Caleb nodded. But he didn't argue further. As night settled, Emma gently closed the door. Caleb stepped into his own room and sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, someone else's presence filling the house. Someone gentle. Someone who brought a quiet, calm. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't bring her here, expecting any future. But he couldn't deny the small, peaceful feeling spreading slowly in the house. A feeling he hadn't known in years. Emma, meanwhile, lay down carefully on the bed, touching the blanket with her fingertips. She looked at the small window, where the moonlight filtered in softly. She whispered a small prayer of thanks, not because she had found a husband, not because she had found a future, but because she had found kindness, on a day when she had expected nothing but loneliness. For the first time since leaving her old life behind, she closed her eyes without fear. And in the quiet of the ranch house, something new began to grow. Slowly. Softly. Just like the cottonwoods along the creek. The next few days passed in a slow, gentle rhythm that neither Caleb nor Emma expected. She woke early every morning, moving quietly around the house so she wouldn't disturb him. She swept the porch, fed the chickens, warmed water for tea, and folded blankets that Caleb often left on the couch. She didn't make noise or rush. She moved with careful steps, as if she still wasn't sure she truly belonged there. Caleb watched her from a distance, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. But every time he saw her wipe dust from the shelves or straighten the curtains, a strange warmth settled in his chest. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten how peaceful it felt to hear another person in the house. She didn't chatter, and he didn't expect her to. Her presence alone made the rooms feel less empty. One morning, as Caleb saddled his horse to check the far fence line, Emma walked out with a small lunch wrapped neatly in cloth. I made this for you, she said softly. Just bread and cheese. Nothing special. Caleb took it, surprised by how thoughtful she was. Thank you, Emma. That means a lot. She smiled, shy but genuine. Be safe out there. Caleb nodded and rode away. But he kept glancing back at the porch, where she stood watching him. He didn't know why it mattered so much. But it felt good to know someone cared whether he made it home safely. While Caleb worked on the fences, Emma stayed busy at the house. She washed the windows until the glass shined. She dusted every corner, humming quietly as she moved. She even found a torn shirt of Caleb's and stitched it carefully, making the fabric stronger than before. It wasn't work born from obligation. It was something she did because she wanted to give back for the kindness he had shown her. That afternoon, when Caleb returned, he found her kneeling near the porch steps, pulling away weeds gently with her hands. She looked up at him and smiled in that small, quiet way she always did. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. "I know," Emma replied. "But it feels good to help. It gives me a purpose." Caleb wanted to tell her she didn't need to earn her place, but he also understood that she needed something to hold on to, something steady and meaningful after the painful disappointment she had faced. Over the next week, they settled into an unspoken pattern. She cooked breakfast. He repaired things around the ranch. She tended the garden. He fed the livestock. They shared small conversations, nothing too deep, but enough to feel connected. Emma asked about the land, the seasons, the cattle. Caleb answered patiently. And sometimes he caught her smiling when he described something in detail. One late afternoon, after finishing his work, Caleb walked to the house and found Emma sitting by the window. She had a letter in her hands, the same folded page she kept in her small bag. Her face looked troubled, and she didn't notice him until he stepped closer. "Everything all right?" he asked gently. Emma placed the letter aside. "It's just the last letter he sent. The man who was supposed to meet me." She took a deep breath. "I keep reading it, wondering if I missed a sign." Caleb sat in the chair across from her. "You didn't miss anything. He changed his mind, and that's on him, not you." Emma looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers slowly. "I keep telling myself that, but it's hard not to feel left behind." Caleb nodded, understanding more than he said. "Emma, you didn't deserve what happened. A decent man would never walk away from someone he asked to come all this way." Her eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you." Before Caleb could say more, a hard knock sounded at the door. Emma jumped a little, startled. Caleb stood and opened the door to find Harris, the man who had abandoned her, standing outside with a sour expression. "So," Harris said, looking past Caleb into the house, "I hear you took in the woman meant for me." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You left her standing at the train station alone." Harris shrugged carelessly. "I changed my mind. I thought she'd be—" Emma stepped back, her face pale. Caleb moved slightly in front of her, not touching her, but creating a silent shield between her and the man who had hurt her. "You should leave," Caleb said calmly, but firmly. Harris scoffed. "She's still mine by agreement. I paid for those letters. I paid for her travel. I know my side." Emma swallowed, her hands trembling slightly. Caleb felt anger rise, but controlled it. He didn't want to fight, but he wouldn't allow Harris to intimidate her. "She doesn't belong to you," Caleb said. "A woman isn't a package you order and return." Harris stepped closer. "You think you can just take her? You're the one acting like you own her now." And, Caleb kept his voice steady. "She's free to decide where she wants to be. And from the look of it, she doesn't want to go anywhere with you." Emma gathered her courage and spoke softly but firmly. "I don't want anything to do with you, Harris." Her voice surprised even her, and Caleb felt a quiet pride for her bravery. Harris glared at her, then at Caleb. "You'll regret getting in the middle of this." Caleb didn't flinch. "This conversation is done. Leave." After a long stare, Harris turned and walked away, muttering under his breath. Caleb watched until the man disappeared down the road, just to be sure he didn't plan to circle back. When Caleb closed the door, Emma leaned against the wall, releasing a shaky breath. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Caleb stepped closer, keeping his voice gentle. "You didn't cause anything. He did. And I wouldn't let him or anyone else treat you that way." Emma's eyes filled with quiet emotion. "Thank you, Caleb. I don't know how to repay your kindness. You don't owe me anything. Emma shook her head softly. I do. Not money. Just gratitude. Respect. Trust. I do and trust. Caleb felt a warm flutter in his chest at those words. Trust. That was something he didn't take lightly. The rest of the day passed quietly. But something between them had shifted. Emma moved with a little more confidence, and Caleb found himself noticing her in ways he hadn't before. Not in a rushed or improper way, but in a gentle, respectful one. She carried courage in her small steps. She held her pain quietly, yet she still offered kindness to the world around her. That evening, Caleb suggested they take a short walk to the hills behind the ranch. The sky glowed orange with the setting sun. Emma walked beside him, her hands clasped lightly in front of her. The sky is beautiful here, she said softly. It always feels bigger out this way, Caleb replied. Emma looked at him. I didn't realize big could feel comforting. Caleb smiled. It grows on you. They walked in silence for a while. The peaceful kind of silence that didn't need filling. Emma finally spoke. Caleb, I've felt afraid since the day I left home. Afraid I made a mistake. Afraid no one would want me. Afraid I'd never belong anywhere. Caleb turned toward her. Emma, you belong wherever you choose to be. And you're stronger than you think. She breathed slowly, her eyes softening. I feel safe here. Safe with you. The words hit Caleb gently but deeply. He didn't reply right away, because he didn't want to say something careless. Instead, he looked out over the hills, gathering his thoughts. I never expected someone like you to come into my life, he said at last. I thought I'd stay alone forever. But you being here, it doesn't feel wrong. It feels natural. Emma's cheeks warmed slightly. I feel that too. They stood there, not touching. But the closeness between them felt calm and steady, like something new was forming. Something soft, patient, and honest. As the last light faded, they walked back together, side by side, with an easy comfort neither had felt in years. Emma didn't fear the dark night ahead, and Caleb didn't fear the quiet house anymore. For the first time, they weren't just two lonely souls crossing paths. They were something new, something quietly growing between them like roots under the soil. The days after their walk felt different, though neither Caleb nor Emma said anything about it out loud. Something gentle hung in the air, like a quiet understanding had formed between them. Emma moved through the house with lighter steps, and Caleb found himself watching her a little more often, always respectfully, but with growing admiration. It was as if her presence softened every hard edge of his life. Caleb woke earlier than usual one morning and stepped outside to feed the horses. The sunrise painted the sky with soft pink and gold, and he breathed in the crisp air, feeling strangely hopeful. He wasn't a man used to expecting good things. Yet now, he found himself imagining a future where he didn't come home to an empty house. A future where Emma's soft humming filled the rooms and her warm smile greeted him at the door. But he kept those thoughts to himself. Emma had been abandoned once, and he didn't want to pressure her or make her think she owed him anything. She deserved to choose her own life, freely. Inside, Emma stood at the kitchen counter, kneading dough for breakfast. She concentrated hard on her work, but her mind wandered to the same thoughts Caleb had. She wondered what would happen next. She had grown used to this house, the soft creak of the floorboards, the smell of fresh hay, the way Caleb always placed his hat on the same hook when he came in. She felt safe here, safe in a way she hadn't felt for years. A part of her wanted to ask if she could stay forever, but she didn't know if that was too bold or too fragile of a hope. As she placed the dough aside, the wind outside changed direction. Dark clouds began to gather quickly, rolling over the hills like heavy gray blankets. Emma looked out the window, worry tightening her chest. Storms on the plains came fast, and she hoped Caleb would make it back before the rain hit. but the sky cracked open sooner than expected. Thunder rumbled loudly, and rain fell in thick sheets that blurred the land into streaks of gray. Emma stepped onto the porch, gripping the railing. She couldn't see far, but she prayed Caleb was already on his way home. After long minutes that felt like hours, she saw a shadow moving through the rain. Caleb appeared on horseback, soaked and fighting against the wind. Emma rushed into the yard with a blanket in her hands. "Caleb," she called, worry rising in her voice. He guided the horse toward the barn, and Emma helped him down. Rain poured off his hat and coat, drenching both of them. The wind howled loudly, but Emma's steady presence beside him made the moment less frightening. She held the blanket up, shielding him from the rain as best as she could, until they reached the barn. Inside, Caleb rubbed the horse down quickly while Emma found a warm cloth and handed it to him. His hands were cold, and she gently wrapped his shoulders with the blanket she brought. "You're freezing," she said softly. "I'll be fine," he replied, though his voice carried a slight shiver. Emma hesitated before speaking again. "Let's get inside before the storm gets worse." Caleb nodded, grateful for her concern. The moment they stepped into the house, the wind slammed the door behind them. The lights flickered, and the roof shook under the weight of the rain. Emma hurried to the fireplace and added wood, blowing gently until the flames rose higher. "Sit," she said, motioning toward the chair nearest the fire. Caleb obeyed, removing his wet coat and boots. Emma placed a warm cup of tea in his hands and pulled a second blanket from the shelf to cover his legs. She didn't speak while she worked. She simply cared for him with a calm steadiness that touched him deeply. "Emma," he said quietly, "you don't have to fuss over me." She shook her head. "You've done so much for me. Let me do this much for you." He smiled, a gentle smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you." The storm outside grew stronger. Lightning flashed, and thunder shook the windows. Emma sat across from him, holding her own warm cup. They listened to the storm in silence, both feeling the same unspoken thought. Tonight, they only had each other to rely on. "Emma," Caleb began, his voice low, "I've been thinking about something for days." She looked up, her fingers tightening slightly around her cup. "What is it?" Caleb shifted in his seat, as if unsure how to begin. "I want to say this carefully because I don't want you to feel pushed or trapped in any way." Emma felt her heart beat faster. Caleb continued, "Since you've been here, the house has felt alive. I've felt less alone. You bring something peaceful into my life. Something warm." Emma didn't speak, afraid her voice might tremble. "I know you came here for someone else," Caleb said softly. "I know you face disappointment and hurt. I never want to add to that pain. That's why I've kept quiet. But I can't pretend anymore that it doesn't matter to me whether you stay or go." Emma's eyes softened, her breath catching faintly. Caleb swallowed, his voice steady but full of honesty. "I care about you, Emma. More than I meant to. More than I expected to. But I don't want you to feel like you owe me your future, just because I helped you through a hard moment." He paused. "If you stay here, I want it to be because you want this place. Because you want a life here. Maybe even with me." Emma set her cup down slowly, her hands trembling just slightly. She stood and walked toward him, stopping a few feet away. "Caleb," she said gently, "I've wanted to say something too, but I didn't know if it was right." He looked up, waiting. "I haven't felt safe in a long time," she said. "But with you, I feel safe every moment. Not because you gave me shelter, but because of the way you speak to me. The way you make sure I'm not frightened. The way you stand between me and harm without making me feel weak." Caleb listened with quiet intensity. "You don't make me feel like a burden," she continued. "You make me feel like I matter. And I haven't felt that in years." Caleb's entire chest warmed. Emma took a slow breath. I don't want to leave this house. I don't want to go back to searching for a future alone. I want to stay here. With you. The storm outside softened for a moment, as if giving them space. Caleb stood from his chair, his expression tender and careful. Emma, if you stay, I want you here. As someone I choose. Not someone fate tossed in my path. I want a real partnership. A real life together. Emma's eyes filled with quiet emotion. That is all I've ever wanted. A life where I'm wanted, not out of duty, not out of obligation, but out of choice. He stepped closer, leaving only a small space between them. Then, stay. Stay. For good. Emma nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek, not of sadness, but of relief. I will. Caleb let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He reached forward, not touching her yet, but letting his hand hover in invitation. Emma placed her hand in his, a simple gesture that held more meaning than any words. The storm slowly eased through the night, and the house grew quiet again. But neither of them felt the silence as empty. They sat together near the fire, not speaking much, just sharing a small blanket and a bigger hope for tomorrow. The next morning, the sun rose over a world washed clean by rain. Birds sang from the trees, and the air smelled fresh. Caleb and Emma stepped outside, standing on the porch side by side. She looked at the land that would now be her home. He looked at the woman who would now be his companion. They didn't need grand promises or dramatic speeches. Their hearts already understood what words could only attempt to describe. Two lonely lives had found each other. Two gentle spirits had healed each other. And from that day on, neither the house nor the hearts inside it ever felt empty again.